Good evening. I want to spend a few minutes with you talking about Horace Mann and his important role within the discipline of education. I've entitled this An Educational Thought Leader with a Lasting Impact because when we look at Horace Mann, he did have that lasting impact and we still feel his impact today. A key element of Horace Mann's life was his childhood, which occurred in Massachusetts. He was born in 1796. And he was a product of the Calvinist fire and brimstone preaching. And he also attended a school that utilized memorization as the mode of instruction. And as Horace Mann moves throughout his life, he will realize, starting very young, that that is not the most effective way to learn. The idea of being presented information from a teacher and then standing to recite that information to the teacher to prove you learned it doesn't prove lasting skill. It doesn't allow you to take that information with you and make it a part of your life. And that's what Horace Mann ultimately sought to do. Focus on the idea that education itself had that lasting value. One of the other key ideas that's important to note about Horace Mann is he was a Whig politician. Now, the Whig Party will be very prominent within the New England states, and obviously, as I mentioned, he was from Massachusetts, so that does put him in the right area to be a member of the Whig Party, but it's going to be his role as a Whig politician that's going to allow him to implement a lot of the change in which he will come up with and he will develop. It gives him that needed platform to be the thinker and also what we'll call the implementer as well. His philosophy of education centered around the idea that everybody should have access to an equal education. Everybody's education should be the same and not dictated by your social class. The other ideas that he regarded within education as being important was the ideas of patriotism, character, and democratic participation. He understood the importance of active citizenship within a democracy. He felt as though that when a citizen was active within democracy, it allowed them to change society rather than being impacted by societal changes that was beyond their control to impact. The final area that he will focus on is the training of teachers. And this is very important to note because, again, as I referenced, he was a product of route memorization within the school in which he grew up. And he noted that that was not a beneficial way to learn, and therefore will place a focus on how teachers should learn to teach and how they can take that information within their classroom. Putting his theory into practice, he placed the focus on the idea of a common school and a normal school. The common school is the forerunner to the public school. It was the school where equality was present because everybody was learning the same material, the basics, reading, writing, and arithmetic, and then also things like history and geography, placing a focus on this idea of being the educated citizen that was going to be participating within their democracy. The normal schools is where teachers would go to learn. Those who were aspiring to be teachers could apply to a normal school. They had to be at least 16 years of age and also had attended a common school themselves. When in the normal school, they would not only focus on subject areas, they would also learn things like educational philosophy, learning ideas about how you should teach, what works, what doesn't work, and complete demonstration teaching, which was very important to Mann's overall idea. Diversity is a key element to note regarding the era, and we have to talk about diversity because Mann was present in an era in which a white Protestant work ethic was predominant within the nation. And a lot of the immigrants who were coming into the country were from countries of Catholic origin. And those two ideas were starting to clash. And when you have that, you have the development of nativist sentiment, and large areas of nativism were present within the country that did have that impact on his ability to reach immigrants with education, because he firmly believed in the importance of providing immigrant children with an education, because then they could go ahead and be those productive citizens within society as well. It's also important to note, again, the Whig Party. The Whig Party was focused on internal reforms, which was what allowed Mann to move forward with a lot of his ideas, and therefore their focus on internal reforms did not make them a party that really focused on immigration or focused on these ideas of being multicultural within society. And this was something that he really could not control, even though it was his desire to provide an education to immigrants. When we focus on analyzing Horace Mann and his ability to make a difference, we want to keep in mind that he lived in a political era. And that's important to note because his role, again, as a Whig politician was something that allowed him to go ahead and implement those changes. Had it not been for his position and his stature, he very well could have been an intellectual thinker that did a lot of writing, but didn't have the ability to implement what he ultimately saw. And he was able to do that as the Secretary of Education in Massachusetts. He also addressed the obstacles to taxation. Obviously, nobody likes taxation, and it's something that was a focal point in the early 19th century as well. And why should taxes support public education? And he had the ability to meet those challenges head on by addressing the benefits to all in society. He also addressed the issue of private wealth. It's not saying that private wealth was bad, but saying that those that would go to a public school were on the same playing field as those other students that didn't have the ability to attend the private schools, such as those who were wealthy. And finally, we have to look at present conditions, because it has been suggested, for example, that a Horace Mann is needed in the 21st century, focusing on the idea of the importance of public education, the importance of physical education rather than having a sedentary nature within students today, and standardized testing and all those differing ideas. And as we conclude, we want to focus on the idea that Mann left a legacy, the focus on public education, the focus on teacher training. And that legacy was impacted because he was a politician. He gave us this concept of public education that's funded by tax dollars. That's still a debate within the modern era. But most importantly, he presented the idea of a noble vocation for teaching. The idea that teaching itself was something that should be pursued, something that should be professionalized. The teacher should be a subject matter expert. And those are the key ideas we want to focus on as it relates to Horace Mann. Thank you.